They've discovered in 25 years of research at the University of Florida, they've looked at people who started at the bottom and got to the top and became the heads of Fortune 500, heads of Fortune 1000 corporations. And they went all the way back to their early performance appraisals and comments by their supervisors, and they found that they had all settled on the same strategy. And the same strategy was to identify the one skill that would help them the most at this stage of their career, and then concentrate single-mindedly on learning that skill. And they were serious about this. They didn't just, read a book or an article. They made a plan, like a lesson plan, and they asked, what are the best books to read in this area? What are the best programs, audio programs to listen to? What are the best courses to attend? And they developed a course of study, and they worked for weeks and months and even a year or more to develop that skill. And once they had developed that skill, and people started to tell them, hey, you're pretty good in that area, that was their sign that they had mastered the skill. And then they would ask their boss or ask their coworkers to look at the top people around them or the most successful business people around them, and they would identify the next skill. And what we find is that all of life is like climbing a ladder, and each step on the ladder is mastering a new skill. And what the top people do, and this is one of the greatest breakthroughs in business success I've ever seen in an entire life of studying the subject, is what they do is they get better one skill at a time. They don't try to get better at 10 skills, because that just exhausts you and you see no progress and you soon quit. So what they would do is focus like a laser beam on a single skill until they had mastered it. But here's the most amazing thing. When you are focusing on the development or acquisition of a particular skill, your whole mind is in improvement mode. So what happens is you automatically start to get better at everything else without even thinking about it. You're just more conscious and aware of things that you can do to be better in other areas by focusing on a single skill. They call this, Pears Anderson, who did all this work, calls it deliberate practice. And it is the key to great success. Deliberately practicing one skill at a time. Now, once you have learned this skill, which you will, only one person in the world that can stop you from mastering a skill. Who is that? It's always yourself. It's a lack of self-discipline, lack of personal management, lack of control, and so on. I don't have enough time, I'm so busy, I'm tired all the time, wah, 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 shut up, shut up. So what it takes, and they found that it takes about 2 hours a day, 5 days a week of deliberate practice or focus on a new skill to master the skill. Once you have mastered the skill, then what do? Well, it's obvious. You ask the question again. Now, what one skill, if I was absolutely excellent at it, would help me the most to achieve my financial or business goals? What's the one skill? I was at a private meeting with the head of one of the biggest companies in the world, and that's terrible because the name escapes me for a second, but I had read a book that he had written 10 years before, and it was based on over 30 years of experience, and he'd run 2 Fortune 500 companies. He said what they discovered was that your weakest important skill sets the height of your income. Your weakest important skill. In every field, there's 5 to 7 vital skills. Your weakest skill in this little group of skills sets the height of your income and your success. And so often it's one skill that's holding us back more than anything else. And when I say that, everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's the one skill. Usually in business, it's marketing or sales or a combination thereof. Sometimes it's business development, customer relationships, and so on. But we know what it is. The only question is, are we going to sit there passively, or are we going to say, damn, I'm going to learn that skill. I'm going to become very, very good at that skill, whatever it happens to be. And the wonderful thing is that once you learn a skill, another thing happens, is a nickel drops in your brain, and you realize, I can learn new skills. Damn, I could learn any skill. I could learn languages. I could learn any skill. Wow, and suddenly the dam breaks in your mind, and all the hesitation and lack of confidence and lack of certainty that you had, suddenly you realize, I can learn anything I need to learn. And it gives you a tremendous sense of power. So from then on, your whole life becomes a do-it-to-yourself project. Your whole life becomes a process of learning one skill at a time, climbing the ladder of success. Every rung on the ladder is higher income, greater influence, greater power in your profession. Getting better in your field is one of the most important things you can do. So I have a question for you, moving right along. What is the most important work that you do in your field? What is the most important and highest paid work that you do? Thinking. You've obviously been here before. And the answer is right. The answer is thinking. When I first heard this question, I wasn't clear about what the answer was. But the most important work you do is thinking well about yourself and your work. In fact, every mistake that you've ever made has been a result of poor thinking or not thinking at all. You all know what I'm talking about. Every success you ever had has usually been the result of really good thinking prior to taking action. Now, the reason why thinking is so important is that the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your decisions. And it's an interesting observation is that you are where you are and what you are today as a result of the total of all your choices and decisions up to this moment. In every part of your life, from the time you became an adult or before, you've made choices and decisions. The cumulative result is where you are today. Your income, your health, your happiness, your business, everything else. But my great rule, which is quoted all the time, is that it doesn't matter where you're coming from. All that really matters is where you're going. And where you're going is only limited by your imagination. So what you do is you say, forget the past. In the past, I could have done things differently, but I can't change the past, but I can change the future completely by what I do now. So the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your choices and decisions. The quality of your choices and decisions determines the quality of your actions, and the quality of your actions determines the quality of your results. And in business and life, everything is results. Results are the most important single word. Is what results are expected of you? What results do you need to get in order to achieve the goals that you set for yourself? And the ability to be absolutely crystal clear about the results that are necessary is the mark of the leader. Peter Drucker said that the first question of the leader is always, what results are expected of me? What results are expected of me to fulfill my responsibilities, to fulfill my commitments? And it's absolutely amazing. If you ask this question, you'll find that 80% of your time at work is spent on doing things that have nothing to do with results. They're just busy things. They're conversations and reading the paper and making phone calls and going for lunch and so on. And if you're really strict with yourself, you'll find that much of what we do contributes nothing to the results that are most important to our success. And successful people are those who are very disciplined. Is this the very best use of my time? Now, the reason that thinking is so important, aside from the results, is because of the word consequences. I began studying time management and designing programs and books, and I'm now one of probably the top time management author in the world in books in 42 languages. And what I found when I was studying time management is this concept of consequences, which was one of those life-changing concepts. What it said was that something is important to the degree to which it has big potential consequences. Something is unimportant to the degree to which it has low or no consequences. And what is the difference between top people and average people? Top people do more and more things that have big potential consequences. Not guaranteed consequences, but potential consequences. Average people spend most of their time doing things that have low or no consequences at all. In other words, if they did them all day long, it wouldn't make any difference. But top people realize there's 2 or 3 things they can do: learning a critical skill, making a critical decision, taking an important action. There's certain things they can do that have enormous potential consequences. I have had experiences where meeting one person at the right time in my career has led to millions of dollars of revenue. And the consequences, I look back and I say, if I had not taken those steps and been assertive and aggressive and traveled and done all those things to establish that relationship, the difference would have been phenomenal. So it's a great question for you to ask. What are the consequences of what you're doing? And of all things, thinking has the greatest consequences. The quality of your thinking has the greatest consequences of all. Now, there's a good deal of work on thinking. We could spend all day on it. But basically, there's 2 dimensions of thinking. One is a Nobel Prize-winning research on the difference between fast thinking and slow thinking. Daniel Kahneman has written a book on this subject. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's a real slap in the face. I mean, whack, you really open your eyes. Basically, he says there's two types of thinking. Fast thinking is intuitive, it's instinctive, it's automatic. Driving through traffic is a perfect example. You're thinking quickly, you're changing traffic and so on, changing lanes and so on. And conversation, almost everything we do is fast thinking, and there's a place for that, for things that are just normal and routine. He said there's another type of thinking though, and he is cited hundreds of times a year in scientific journals all over the world with this one concept. It's called slow thinking. And slow thinking is where you slow down and take time to think carefully before you commit time and resources and money, before you take an action. And many people make the mistake of mixing the two. So they're actually doing things with fast thinking, quick decisions, when they should be saying, wait a minute, time out, stop, let me think about this. I remember working with a man, he was a great mentor of mine, started with nothing, he was worth $800 million when I worked with him, and he owned 200 companies. And this guy was brilliant. He could read a contract, and he could read a contract from the back. He could read a contract from the back, and 6 months later quote it back to me. He had a photographic memory. Never seen that before. This guy was a genius. Everybody who knew him considered him to be one of the smartest business people in the world, at least if not in the country. And whenever I talked about anything serious with him, investments, businesses, developments, and so on, he would always say, let me think about that for a while. So we started talking on a Wednesday or Thursday, Friday. He said, let me think about it for a while. And what I learned later, as I watched really successful people, is that they realized that some things required slow thinking. And Drucker talks about this. He talks about the important things you do, like selecting a new employee, going into a business, developing a partnership, taking on a major client. These require slow thinking. And fast thinking in these areas can almost invariably lead to failure and tremendous losses. So what these top business people would do is when it was a big decision that had big potential consequences, they would slow down, and the way that they would slow down is they would just put time between the information and the decision. And what we find, there's lots of research on this, is the more time you put between getting the initial information and making the final decision, the better your decision will be. So the rule is, if it is not necessary to decide, it is necessary not to decide. And it's a very simple concept that will dramatically increase the quality of your decisions and your long-term potential results. Which brings us to the other type of thinking, which is very close. It's short-term versus long-term thinking. Short-term thinking is where you make decisions quickly without doing a lot of thought or research. Long-term thinking is where you think 5 or 10 years into the future when you make your decisions today. That's like, for example, if we say, this is what our company will look like in 5 years. Beautiful company. And then you come back to the present and you say, what would we have to do starting today to create this wonderful company? And then every single thing that you do, you say, is this consistent with the company we want to build? If we want to have a company with a great reputation for quality, would we release this particular product or service, which may not be that good? So if you have a long-term view of your future, it dramatically improves the quality of your short-term decisions. Dr. Edward Banfield at Harvard spent 50 years on this. He found the mark of upward social mobility, especially in business, financial success, was long-term thinking. The people who moved up the fastest in the income scale in every society were the ones who thought long-term when they engaged in their daily behaviors and made their daily decisions. And every great researcher, thinker, strategist that I've studied in the last 25 years has come to the same conclusion. So this is just a very important thing. Whenever you are faced with a big decision that has big potential consequences, just say, let me think about that for a while. And the ideal time is 72 hours. 72 hours just seems to be the perfect time to turn an idea over before you make a decision. If it's not necessary to decide, it's necessary not to decide. Say, let me think about that over the weekend and I'll get back to you next week. And when you do that, you will be astonished at how much better a thinker you are, how much better decisions you make, and how much more successful you are. So these are the critical things about thinking. Which brings us to another question. And the question is, what is your most valuable financial asset? Well, knowledge, that's all true, but the answer is your earning ability. It's your ability to earn money is your most valuable financial asset. Unless you're born rich or you're born into a situation where you have lots of money, most of us start off with usually nothing. Many of us start off poor. We come from limited backgrounds. That's the nature of the successful business person. Is they say that in adult life, we are driven most in adult life to compensate for the lack that we felt as children. Whatever lack that we felt or deficiency we felt as children, we're unconsciously motivated to compensate for that as adults. So many of the most successful business people came from humble backgrounds. Not all of them, but most of them. Most of the fortunes, the millionaires and billionaires today are first generation. They started with nothing. And then, because they had this internal drive, they got smarter and more experienced, and they had talents and skills, and today they're wealthy. So your earning ability is your most valuable financial asset. Economists are now calling this your earning power. So if you earn $50,000 a year, your earning power is $50,000 a year. It's usually 90% or more of your financial assets. If you have a house or a car or some savings, then that's part of your financial assets. But basically, most of what we have is our earning ability. So you could lose your job and lose your house and your car and your business, which happens all the time. But if you could be left standing there with the ability to earn money, you could go back into the marketplace and start to pump tens of thousands or dollars or more into your life by simply applying your earning ability to your world. And most people ignore their earning ability. It's almost like walking past a brick or a bag on the sidewalk. They just walk past it and they say, oh, they don't realize this is the most precious thing you have. And your earning ability is either increasing or decreasing. Your earning ability does not remain the same. It's either going up because you're upgrading your skills continually, or it's going down because your skills are becoming obsolete in a fast-changing world.